There is a man whose life was destroyed in one night. His name is Carlos Palazuelos. He is a delivery driver. He works routes through Tucson, Arizona. He is not famous. He is not connected to Nancy Guthrie. He is not a suspect. But on one February evening, his entire world changed. Federal agents broke down his front door. They tore apart his garage. They searched his car. They questioned him for hours. And then they released him without charges. But here is what happened after they let him go, and it is worse than what happened before. His family was photographed by strangers. His wife was followed by a red truck. His children watched their father's face on the news tied to the words kidnapping and missing woman, with no official statement anywhere saying he had nothing to do with it. He asked for one thing, one simple thing: public clearance. A statement from the sheriff saying he was innocent. 100 days later, he still has not received it. And tonight, I am telling his story. Because what happened to Carlos Palazuelos tells us something critical about the investigation into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. Something about how this case has been handled from the very beginning. And something about why 136 days later, Nancy is still missing. If you are new to the Crime Journal, subscribe right now and turn on notifications. We are not stopping until Nancy Guthrie comes home. Before we talk about what happened to him, you need to understand who he is. Carlos Palazuelos is a delivery driver. He works for Amazon, for DoorDash, for any service that needs packages delivered across Tucson. He wakes up early. He drives routes. He drops packages on porches. He comes home to his wife. He sees his kids. He is not famous. He has no criminal record. He has never been arrested. He has never been in trouble with the law. He is the kind of person most of us pass on the street without noticing. He is a working man trying to provide for his family. And on February 10, 2026, his life became a nightmare. Not because he did anything wrong, but because his eyes, partially visible through a ski mask on a grainy doorbell camera, happened to resemble the eyes of the person investigators were looking for in the Nancy Guthrie case. That is the entire reason his life changed. Not evidence. Not a connection. Not anything concrete. 2 eyes. In the dark. Behind a mask. On a consumer-grade doorbell camera with motion blur and poor lighting. That is what destroyed Carlos Palazuelos. On the evening of February 10th, a gray SUV was pulled over near Rio Rico, Arizona, about 60 miles south of Tucson near the Mexican border. The driver was Carlos's wife. He was a passenger. Within minutes, he was sitting in the back of a patrol car. Federal agents and Pima County deputies had obtained a search warrant for his house that same night. They broke down the front door. They broke down the garage door. They searched through his entire home while his family watched. They took his phone. They examined his car. They questioned him for hours. But here is the critical detail that nobody has talked about clearly enough. They never accused him of anything. They never told him what he was being detained for. They never explained why his house was being torn apart. They never gave him a reason. Carlos described it himself, standing outside his broken home at 3 in the morning. He said, "I felt like I was being kidnapped. They did not tell me anything." He was held against his will, questioned without knowing why, released without being told he was cleared. Just silence. Just confusion. Just a man who had done nothing wrong sitting in the back of a patrol car wondering if his life was over. Here is what led investigators to Carlos in the first place. And this detail matters enormously, because it tells you something about the entire investigative process in this case. Investigators showed doorbell footage to Carlos's mother-in-law, Josefina. They showed her the masked figure, and they asked her, "Do those eyes look like anyone you know?" And she looked at the photo. And in that moment, her brain connected 2 things that should never have been connected. She said the eyes look like Carlos. Now, understand what that means. She was shown a photo of someone's eyes through a ski mask in the dark on a grainy doorbell camera, and asked to identify someone. And her brain, under pressure, under stress, under the weight of a missing woman, made a connection. This is not her fault. This is how the human brain works. When you are shown an image, and asked, "Does this look like someone you know?" your brain often finds what it is looking for even if it is not really there. Eyewitness identification, even from people who know the subject personally, is one of the most unreliable forms of evidence in criminal investigation. Study after study has confirmed this. But law enforcement took that identification seriously enough to come to Carlos's house with federal warrants and broken doors. And when they found nothing, they released him. But they never told anyone that they released him. They never said publicly that his eyes did not match the suspect in any meaningful forensic way. They never issued a statement saying he had nothing to do with Nancy's disappearance. They just let him go. And left him to deal with the consequences alone. Carlos walked out of his house at 3 in the morning to find reporters waiting with cameras. He gave multiple interviews. He stood in the cold. He told his story to Fox News, to NBC News, to local reporters. And he said something that should have been the end of his involvement. "All I know is they showed my mother-in-law a picture of somebody wearing a mask and they supposedly said it looks like my eyes. I am not it. I hope they find the suspect." That should have been it. A man cooperated. He answered questions. His house was searched. Nothing was found. He was released. But it was not the end. It was the beginning of something much worse. Within days, Carlos and his wife were followed everywhere they went. A red truck appeared behind them. It was there the next morning. It was there when they were doing DoorDash deliveries. Strangers were photographing them, taking pictures of their family. Carlos described it this way: "It has been kind of scary for me and for my wife, my kids, and everybody." His wife, who did nothing but drive the car that night, was now being followed by strangers. His kids, who were home when federal agents broke down their doors, were living in a house where everyone in town knew their father's face had been on the news. And through all of it, the sheriff's department said nothing. No statement, no clearance, no official word that Carlos Palazuelos had nothing to do with Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. Just silence while his family lived in fear. About a week after his release, Carlos sat down with an attorney named Jesse Showalter, and together they made a simple request of Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos. Come out publicly. Say that Carlos Palazuelos had nothing to do with Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. Clear his name. That is all he asked for. Not money. Not an apology. Just a public statement saying he was innocent. And that request was never granted. Not that week. Not in the weeks that followed. Not in the months that came after. As far as any public record shows, Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos never issued a statement clearing Carlos Palazuelos. He was never officially charged. He was never officially named as a suspect. But he was also never officially cleared. He was left in the worst possible place a human being can be left. Not guilty, but never publicly innocent either. If you are new to the Crime Journal, subscribe right now and turn on notifications. We are not stopping until Nancy Guthrie comes home and every person caught in this investigation's wake gets the justice they deserve. Now, here is why this story matters so much to the Nancy Guthrie investigation. Because what happened to Carlos Palazuelos is a window into how this entire case has been handled. Think about what the February 10th operation revealed. Investigators had a lead. They pursued it with federal warrants and significant resources. They conducted a thorough search. They found nothing. They released their subject. And then they said nothing publicly. That is the same pattern we have seen throughout this investigation. Evidence gathered in silence. Leads pursued without transparency. People affected by the investigation left without official clarity about their status. The Guthrie family, Nancy's children and their spouses received a public statement clearing them as suspects. That was right. That was appropriate. That was how the system should work. Carlos Palazuelos received no such statement. And that disparity between who gets the protection of official clearance and who gets left in limbo says something important about how this investigation has prioritized certain people over others. He asked for one sentence. Just one. Carlos Palazuelos had nothing to do with Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. One sentence from the sheriff. One sentence that would have given a working man his life back. One sentence that would have stopped the red truck. Stopped the photographs. Stopped the fear. 100 days of waiting for one sentence that never came. This is what 136 days of this investigation looks like from the outside. A missing 84-year-old woman whose family is still waiting for answers. A volunteer mothers group in Mexico searching a killing field because American investigators never formally engaged with what was 60 miles south of Nancy's home. A sheriff who has not been contacted by Mexican authorities and has not reached out to them either. And a delivery driver in Tucson whose garage door was broken by federal agents who found nothing and who is still waiting for someone with a badge to say publicly that he had nothing to do with any of it. These are not separate stories. They are the same story. The story of an investigation that has failed the people it was supposed to serve. That has protected some and exposed others. That has moved slowly where it should have moved fast and stayed silent where it should have spoken clearly. Nancy Guthrie deserved better than this from day one. Carlos Palazuelos deserved better than this from day one. And the truth buried somewhere in 50,000 tips, and a laboratory at Quantico, and a desert 60 miles south of her home, deserves to finally come out. To Sheriff Nanos, one sentence. That is all it takes. Carlos Palazuelos had nothing to do with Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. He asked for it 100 days ago. He is still waiting. Issue that statement. Give this man his life back. And then turn your full attention to the person who actually took Nancy, the person whose mistakes are embedded in the physical evidence at Quantico, and bring them to justice. That is what Nancy deserves. That is what her family deserves. That is what this investigation has owed everyone from the very beginning. If you have any information about what happened to Nancy Guthrie, call 1-800-CALL-FBI immediately. You can also contact the Pima County Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4900. The reward is $1.2 million. It is real. It is unclaimed. And someone out there knows something they have not said yet. Share this video right now. The more eyes on this case, the more pressure on everyone who knows where Nancy is. Nancy Guthrie deserves to come home. Carlos Palazuelos deserves his name cleared. And we are not stopping until both of those things happen.